It's 1990. It's Christmas morning. There was a gift just sitting there with my name on it. I tore through the wrapping paper and there it was. StarTropics. A game I'd never heard of, but little did I know, I had just received what was going to become a game that would shape who I am as a gamer to this day. Let's talk about why StarTropics was so iconic to me. Welcome to Raised by Pixels, a brand new series where I revisit games that shaped my childhood. Today, we're talking about one of the most magical gifts I ever received, StarTropics on the NES. Christmas was very special to me growing up. I got to visit my grandparents, I got to eat amazing Christmas dinner, make beautiful snow angels outside. However, there was one Christmas morning that stood out to me, and that was Christmas of 1990. It was a pretty typical Christmas morning. The whole family gathered around the tree, opening the usual gifts. Clothes, and more clothes. Nothing too special, but there was one gift that made this particular Christmas stand out. It was a brand new copy of StarTropics for the NES. At first glance, it looks very generic. Just the title StarTropics with a very generic island scene with palm trees. I was excited to play it. However, there was one issue. It was Christmas morning, and I was visiting my grandparents. My NES was back home, and I wouldn't be home until after the new year. Talk about torture to a little kid who very rarely got a new game. So I'm sitting there for the next week, glancing at the game, looking at the manual, which, by the way, was full of beautiful full-color art, reading the letter, which is something we'll get back to later, and reading the back of the box. Both of which, of course, I had to have my parents help me because, hey, I was a kid. My reading skills, very minimal. All while I was impatiently anticipating the moment when I could finally pop this brand new game into my NES and try out StarTropics. So did you ever have a Christmas like that? One where you got a gift that you couldn't wait to try, but you had to be patient as you couldn't use it just quite yet? Let me know down below. Anywho, this wait was agonizing, but oh so incredibly worth it. When I finally got home, I popped in StarTropics and turned on my NES, only to be greeted by that playful jaunt of an intro music. I started playing the game and honestly, I was kinda confused. Keep in mind, in 1990 into 1991, I didn't really have much RPG experience. And as I was young, my reading skills were pretty minimal, and this game starts off kinda like Final Fantasy with an overworld, talking to NPCs and exploring towns and a world map. Honestly, I initially wasn't that hyped, and I didn't think the game would be that fun. However, it was at that moment that I entered the first dungeon, and I heard that boppin' dungeon soundtrack that I realized this wasn't just another game. This was something special and a game that would stick with me for years to come. So what exactly is it that made StarTropics so special? It looks like a generic cross between Final Fantasy and Zelda, doesn't it? Even the file select screen and dungeon overlay looks identical. Your health meter is hearts for gosh darn sake. A straight up clone of Zelda almost. So before we get into this, let's talk a little bit of history about StarTropics. So StarTropics is a bit unique because it's a game developed in Japan. However, it didn't get a release in Japan. It was developed exclusively for American audiences, and this is very apparent when you look at the context of the game. You play as Mike Jones, a very common American boy's name. He plays baseball, he lives in Seattle, and he has an Uncle Jones, who is an archaeologist. On top of this, every island name ends with the suffix cola, because Americans like soda, probably. And there are various passwords that you need to find. One is 1492 and the other is 1776, both of which are key years in American history. Some might say it's stereotypical, but honestly, I think it's what makes it relatable. But this is all coming from a Canadian, so take that as you will. I just want to know, did you ever get StarTropics back in the day? Or was there a game you got one Christmas that totally changed your world? Let me know, I'd love to hear your story. Anyways, back to StarTropics. StarTropics is both a JRPG similar to Final Fantasy, and an action-adventure game sort of like Zelda. In JRPG mode, you walk around tropical villages gathering information by talking to NPCs, which will lead you to the dungeons. In these dungeons, you move on a grid-based field, which can be a bit annoying and restrictive, and sometimes a bit frustrating, but you also fight different types of monsters in these dungeons with a yo-yo and various tools such as warping soccer cleats, bolas, baseball bats, ray guns, and more, all while solving puzzles. Even though some of the puzzles sometimes seem like trial and error and can easily lead you to your death, but that was all part of the experience, even if you feel a bit cheated at times. But here's the part about StarTropics that blew my mind as a kid. I mentioned a letter. With every copy of StarTropics, you received a letter from your Uncle Jones, asking you to come to visit him on your summer vacation. However, this letter is actually integral to the game. In Chapter 4, there's a point where you get a message from an NPC to pass on a message from your Uncle Jones, and you're told to dip my letter in water. But you don't have any letters in your inventory. So what letter are they talking about? Well, actually, how about I just show you? Alright, so this is my copy of StarTropics right here. The original one that I've had for God knows how long. Anyway, so I'm going to show you the letter here. So let's open this up. So yeah, so the letter here, let's get in there. Really don't want to damage it because I've had it for a very long time. How about I read you the letter too? So it's beautiful. I love it. Okay, so the letter here. I don't know if you guys will be able to. Yeah, you're not going to be able to read that. But anyways, it says, "Dear Mike, I am sorry I did not write you sooner, but I just returned from a long voyage in the islands in search of lost ruins and artifacts. I was very pleased to find your letter upon my return. Boy, time sure is flying by. Last time I saw you, you were just starting school, and now 15 years old, an honor student, and captain of your high school baseball team. See what I mean by it's very stereotypically American? I think it's a great idea that you visit me during your vacation. I'm sure that you'll enjoy the tropical islands, the blue water, and the friendly people you'll find living under the Southern Cross. You can even take a cruise in my super submarine, Sub-Sea. I've included some pictures and a map of Sea Island for you. Hope to see you soon. Give your regards to my family." And then because it's Canadian, it has it in French as well. And then down at the bottom here it says, "Caution, do not taste, eat, or otherwise consume this paper." Really? Note, this letter is very important, so please hold on to until the end of the game. Then again, French. Okay, so remember how I said dunk it in water? So I'm just going to show you here. So I'll put this in here. This is painful to do. If you dump water, I don't know if it's supposed to be cold water, but you put water on there. And I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit. So you can kind of tell. You can't, I need to get it all wet. God, this is so painful to do. Mike, I found some strange creatures, or some strange ciphers in my last voyage. Since then, someone has been watching me. I put a tiny transmitter in my shoe. Its frequency is 747 megahertz. That is the password for that part. It's kind of cool, actually, because unless you got the game used and didn't have this letter included, then you'd be stuck. Because remember, back in the early 90s, internet wasn't all that common with all the guides that we have these days. So either you'd be limited to trial and error, unless you somehow found it elsewhere. Maybe it was copyright protection, who knows? Still, I think it was pretty cool. I didn't know it back when I first played it, but StarTropics planted a seed. It taught me that games are more than just action. Games could be adventures, journeys, and video games were a new way to escape. Keep in mind that before StarTropics, all I played were games like Duck Hunt, Kung Fu, or Super Mario Bros. So games that told a story were a brand new concept to me. StarTropics still actually holds up today. Once you get around the awkward movement system and some of the cheap deaths, it's a solid action game with some goofy humor that you'll just fall in love with. I actually replayed this game recently and I did a full review on it, so maybe check that out after you're done here if you're interested in a full, in-depth look at StarTropics and why it still matters. Unfortunately, StarTropics did get a sequel, and as it's not nearly as good as the first game, it didn't have that charm, and that's where the series ended. There have been a few re-releases on the Wii Virtual Console and Switch Online, but since then, there have been no new releases. It's actually high on my list of games that I really want to have remastered or remade, because it's still one of my favorite games of all time. So there you have it. StarTropics might not be the most famous NES game, but for me, it was unforgettable. That one cartridge on that cold winter 1990s Christmas morning changed everything. This is the first of many stories. Raised by Pixels is my way of honoring the games that raised me. So if you had a game like that, I hope you'll stick around and hear all of my stories. So hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ding that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode of Raised by Pixels. And before you head off, why not check out one more video? This has been Shinky, thanks so much for watching, and until next week's video, have a wonderful day.